We're very glad to have you. Thank you for joining us. Okay, go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's session. I'm Christy Vanko with Motivity, and we're really excited to bring you this future-focused presentation. Our platform serves as the backbone for data collection across over 450 amazing organizations. And since joining Motivity in 2016, I've been excited to be a part of this best-in-class data collection system. So if you're curious, sign up for a demo on motivity.net, and I'll put that in the chat for you in a little bit. Now, often, Motivity provides CEUs for presentations on Behavior Live, but our future-focused presentations don't really qualify. However, we are confident that your time is not going to be wasted. Oh, one more thing I want to mention. So if you want our presenter or our host to address something specifically or answer your question, use the question button at the bottom, not the chat function. You'll be able to vote for questions that you want to have answered, and if you don't have any of your own. Feel free to use the chat feature, though, to just chat. Now on to our feature presenter. Nathan is the co-founder of Juniper, building automation and technology for ABA providers, ranging from local clinics to national organizations. He and his other co-founders previously had careers at McKinsey, working with hospital systems, insurance payers, and national ABA providers on tech transformations. Today, Juniper leverages 1.2 billion approximately of annualized ABA insurance claims to automate the billing and collections process for ABA providers. That's pretty impressive. All right, I'm going to turn you over to Brian Curley. That's Motivity's Chief Creative Officer, and he's going to be your host. Take it away, Brian.
Thanks, Christy. Yeah, so the focus, the idea and the goal around Future Focus is to shine a light on some of these great companies that are popping up all over ABA and give them a long-form way of discussing and communicating their contributions to ABA with their software, and allowing them to kind of deep dive into their backgrounds, their values, their mission, all while explaining how they're shaping the market of ABA. So without further ado, Nathan, co-founder of Juniper, thanks for joining. Tell us a little bit about Juniper, how you guys got started, and yeah, let's start there.
That sounds great, and it's really great to be here. So thanks, Brian, for having me, and just the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're building here, and obviously, you know, some great work that we've been able to do, and with folks like you guys over at Motivity as well. We got started because we saw, based on some of our previous experience, that technology traditionally was really in the hands of the largest, most well-funded type of organizations, whether that was like the multi-billion-dollar hospital systems or the insurance payers or even the national folks in the space today. And we're really passionate about taking that technology and those resources and really sharing that with everyone that we can. And when it came to building technology and automation, we're just really passionate about serving folks across the entire spectrum of sizes and localities and what they're doing and where they are. Personally, too, really close family friends that are clinical directors of pediatric therapy clinics as well. So, you know, kind of the personal ties there. I also did my own speech language pathology growing up. So, with the village of care type of model. So there's you know, that personal angle as well. And my co-founders and I, we all have that. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, it was also like pretty life-changing, frankly. And like, I don't know for you, but so really passionate about that. And I think a lot of it too is we saw like one of my family friends running a local clinic, like pretty small owner operated. There was this gap between getting the insurance reimbursement, the insurance payment, and actually be able to front payroll and like hire clinicians. And when we looked at those types of problems, first inspired by our work at doing consulting for the large folks, but the same types of challenges that they would have at large scales, at small scales meant really big implications for like hiring clinicians and like serving families and that kind of stuff. And it just felt like that shouldn't be the case, and there should be technology that can bridge that gap. So that was like a huge motivation for us getting started. I know, very abstract, but really important to who we are and the mission that we want to serve.
Yeah, I mean, you're starting off with a behemoth of a leap. You know, it's not an easy undertaking. That's by any means. But you make a point in that if you do want to start up in this market, you do need a significant amount of capital, even if it's just to front the first 3 months,
Yep.
right before you start getting
Yep.
getting your claims paid, right?
Yeah. And we've worked with clinics that have been, there's a few that we're really proud of, like clinics in Oklahoma serving purely Medicaid-based families that have
Mhm.
only maybe one or two funding sources, right? And they have, two, 3 dozen client families. And if one thing goes wrong, then, your entire lifeline, your financial lifeline, basically goes under. And so there's been
Yeah.
cases in which we've gone in really quickly and like stabilized that. And even in some cases, like worked with partners to front capital just to get things across the line. And I think serving that type of mission has been really important to us.
Yeah. So let's dive into actually what all that means. I don't know if you want to go into the slides right
Awesome.
away. That's up to you.
Let's do it. Yeah, this is one way that we like to kind of show what that process means. So a lot of the automation that we're building today helps with when you provide service, actually getting paid for that service, just making that challenge go away. And so before this was and for those that are watching this, where maybe you're an owner operator, maybe you have a small clinic, and maybe you've done this yourself, maybe you've worked with another company that does it. This is kind of like the standard way, right? So you have a session that's ready to bill, maybe some direct treatment 97153 with the RBT. Then that session gets taken and batched or created into a claim. Then you add the different information, you look for errors, you submit it, you wait. And that waiting process, it depends on, is it Blue Cross Blue Shield? Is it TRICARE? Is it Kaiser? It can be a few days, it can be weeks, it can be months in some cases. If it's wrong, you go fix it, and you go through this entire process, right? And it's like, going back to my family friends, if you don't also understand that process, we're talking about a month, 2 months of delayed payment, right? And so
Sure.
that's kind of the way the world, and often today still works. Especially, I mean, when you're doing this by hand, you're doing it manually. There's no kind of going around this process, and so
Hmm.
that's really where the world looks like today. And we saw this, and we were like, there's got to be a better way to do it. So, yeah, I'll stop there for a second, but that's kind of the world today that we
Okay.
saw.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I'm used to. Back in my prior life, this is what we built. Almost
Yeah,
exactly to. We built the ABA billing software. And, yeah, you could batch multiple things into one claim and make things a little bit cleaner, or you could
yeah,
have some insight as to what's happening at the clearinghouse, or you to post payments afterwards, and kind of do your what's it called when you match your payments up with your actual what came into your bank account.
reconciliation.
But
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
reconcile. Yeah. So there's a lot of different tools that have already been built for this exact flow, right?
yeah.
But what you're saying is, I mean, I guess every arrow is aside from like the rejected, accepted, is there could be an error somewhere, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and when that error comes up, it might take weeks to actually even know if it was wrong, right? And that's really part of the challenge is,
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know, the insurance payer is going to take the time that they're going to take. They're going to give you the feedback, but that feedback, if that takes weeks, and then you got to fix that mistake, they got to reprocess
Hmm.
it. You got to go through the whole waiting period again, and especially for smaller providers, that's really challenging. Large providers as well, and there's a reason why we serve kind of the national folks as well, is because that does make impact for them on cash flow and investments and things like that. But I would say, especially for the owner operated local mom and pop type of clinic organization, you go through another 30 days of waiting time. That's two payrolls, right? And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Of
know,
course.
the mistakes, even if it's the smallest thing, it has a ton of impact. And again, we've worked with so many local operators where this has been incredibly challenging and was a huge burden for them. A ton of stories actually talking with folks early on in our journey, 4-ish years ago, when we were like learning more about the space and how we could help, of a very common thread of owners asking family friends for $5,000 here, $10,000 there to make payroll because,
hmm
oh, they were expecting this $40,000 check to come in from the state Medicaid, but maybe there were no mistakes. The state Medicaid was just late and just said, hey, we're
Right.
having some budgeting challenges. We're just going to wait and you'll get this next month. Like, there's nothing the clinic can really do about that. But
Yeah.
your payroll is your payroll and you got to pay your people. And that's incredibly important. So, this common thread of like asking family friends, hey, can you just spot me like 5 grand here, 10 grand
Yeah.
there, just to make payroll? And and I think for my co-founders and I that come from a technology background, from a financial background, some of our experiences in consulting, we look at that story and hearing that so many times. And I think candidly, it caused a lot of frustration for us. We're like, that shouldn't that shouldn't be the way the world works. Yet that's how the world works today. That's something
Yep.
that we think we can change. And so that was a huge, and it still continues to be a huge motivator for us to continue building what we're building.
Yeah. I feel like it's such a good spot to wiggle into because or I take for a while on the marketing side, but we would do contracts and get paid usually on like a net 90. And when we were starting
Yeah.
that company, you know, capital before that wave hits you, and then you
Yeah.
just hope you can ride that wave of revenue from 3 months ago, right? And that's
Yeah.
constantly pushing you, like, um, so the work that you're doing today won't tomorrow. It's going to pay the bills in 3 or 4 months, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so the fact that you guys took a look, like, I think was really good, and you saw some lending opportunities there to be able to smooth that road over, which is super cool.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear more
Yeah.
how all that works.
Yeah. This is basically it's a fairly simplified version of things, and I often tell folks, as all this stuff is easier said than done. And if you're watching this and you're more on the technical side, we'd love to chat with you about how everything actually works behind the scenes. This is kind of the high level overview. So instead of having a manual process where individuals are going in and keying in those claims, checking it by site, making sure everything's there, checking for errors, we basically built what we call a rules engine. And that rules engine automates the process of making sure that everything looks exactly right so that we can then submit the claims without any human intervention. So without any kind of stopping point or anyone having to look at it, because our system and the rule set checks everything proactively. So basically, when the session's ready to build, it goes into that validation, the rules engine that we use, kind of all that claim data that we were
hmm
talking about during the intro, and says, okay, does that have the right modifier set? Does it have the right authorization number? Does it have this very specific modifier order for GTN 95 that might vary based on the insurance payer because everyone has their own rules? How can we make sure that everything looks exactly right and then automatically submit it? If there's something that needs to be fixed, we can automatically then say, hey, we know this would have gotten denied for this reason. Let's not wait 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks to get that from the payer. Let's fix that right now. Let's fix that today. Once that gets fixed, the information gets pulled back down into our system, goes through the rule set again automatically. And then as
hmm
soon as we know it's going
hmm
to get paid, then it gets submitted automatically overnight. And then insurance pays it and we get the cash. And so this type of automation process, what we're basically saying is, hey, when we have enough data and we have enough sophistication to build great rules to predict denials, they just shouldn't happen anymore. And so one metric that we often use is to say, hey, when you submit a claim for the very first time, what is that payout rate? I submit a claim for $100 or
Sure.
thousands of claims for $100. Like, what percentage of them will get paid the first time without a denial, with any kind of interruption? We're usually increasing that by a fairly large amount. So, here 5 to 15 percentage points, it should actually say. Like, I usually see folks, especially on the SMB side, you might have the first pass pay rate be between 75 and 85%, and the rest of it gets kicked back as denials, and then you have to rework it and go through that process that we talked about. We want to be at 90, 95, 98% all on that first pass.
Sure.
And
Sure.
if you think about like the time it takes to collect that cash and the cash in the bank for payroll, it makes a huge difference for these providers to say, hey, we're not bleeding out, you know, 10 cents on the dollar, 15 cents on the dollar,
Yeah.
20 cents on the dollar. We're
Yeah.
collecting almost as much as we possibly can the very first time. That's immediately going to where I need it to go to. And so that's how that system
Yeah.
works. And because it's technology, it never sleeps, right? We can have this going day and night, weekends, holidays, everything just goes. And the last thing I'll add about it is we're removing a single point of failure that used to be very high risk, right? I mean, I've talked with so many local owner operators who maybe they submit their own claims themselves, but no one else on the
Mhm.
team can do it. And so I've talked with there was this provider in uh, Texas that I talked to who she had never taken vacation in the 5 years since she started her clinic, because if she took vacation, no one would submit claims, so they
Yeah.
literally could not get paid, right? So like that's the kind of situation that a lot of folks are in when you have, you know, individuals, you have people working this type of job in a way that creates, you know, a lot of heartache and a lot of pain. And if something goes wrong or it's all up to you, that burden, that weight on your shoulders is
Yeah.
incredibly
That's crazy.
challenging. And
Mhm.
ultimately, like the goal should be the only thing you should care about is the quality of your clinical care, right? It should be like the kiddos that you're serving, the families that you're serving. It should be training and hiring great clinicians. Like, in what world does it make sense that someone that trained for years and years and years to be a clinician or clinical director has to worry about
It's now a
submitting
manager running a business.
claims, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And a
Like
biller. Yeah.
that it doesn't make that's not how the world should work in our opinion. And so this whole process makes it so that eventually you should take it for granted. I mean, when you go and like tap your credit card on like to buy your coffee, you're not thinking about like, oh, am I gonna get paid? It just happens, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
that's really our mission, our goal is to build something that can make it that easy.
Yeah. So let's talk about this rules engine a little bit, because that's the secret sauce, I feel like, in what you're doing here. Like
Yeah.
there's so much knowledge and information in there, um, that previously was in, let's say, a really good ABA builder's head, or maybe
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
some Google Doc or something like that, or some
Yeah.
spreadsheet. So I guess walk me through kind of how you built it. Like where did you
Yep.
write your first rules from? Like where did you seed that
Yeah.
data from, and then how is it learning as you
Yeah.
go?
Great question. So, and you're totally right. That rules engine is really the brains of the entire operation. And when we started our company, we didn't actually start a company to do billing because we felt like we couldn't do this well until we had the data to create the rules and then create the infrastructure to use those rules and then work through all this that we're describing here. And so when we started our company, we started by aggregating and understanding data. And so a lot of our early partnerships in our work were with large scale providers working across different bespoke tooling and automation. We did a lot of analytics type of work, things like that, with the goal of building the knowledge to create rule sets. And those rule
Mhm.
sets might be something like, okay, for uh, Oklahoma Medicaid, we know that box 17, the ordering and referring provider, needs to be this specific type of provider that matches box 24J on that CMS 1500,
Yeah.
like very specific stuff. And instead
Yeah.
of doing it, like you said, like with massive workforce of individuals with knowledge in their brains to say, what does the data just say? And the data says, well, when I do it this way, I get this payment. And when I do it that way, I don't get a payment, or vice versa. And so we're taking all of that and we're applying a, a very kind of sophisticated amount of analytics on that, things like clustering analysis and some machine learning and things like that to say
Hmm.
those patterns we can extract out of that data set to create those initial rules. That's how we started. And so by the time we actually started submitting claims, we had a lot of that already built into what I would call like archetypes of rules. And those archetypes of rules say, based on all of the analysis we're doing, we know that these specific pieces of a claim are the ones that will likely have to change or create rule sets around, like the type of provider, the authorization, the credentialing rules, like things like that, the modifier orders. And so these archetypes, the permutations of them, the types of rules, obviously in very large amounts of cases. And once you set up kind of an engine that can quickly adjust those things based on new data, as we serve more and more providers, and today we're working with a large number of multi-state, regional, national providers with a lot of different payer sets and diverse payers to work with, geographies, things like that, to constantly improve that rules engine by doing configurations that can be defined by the patterns that we see, the new patterns that we see. Last thing I'll add here is that means that because, like you said, instead of having all the knowledge in someone's brain, it's in the rules engine. When we go serve your local owner operator clinic down the street, it's almost like you have that power and that knowledge and that sophistication that only was reserved for in the past, like those multi-billion-dollar hospital systems, right? This is something that we can now democratize that access to everyone, and we're really passionate about that.
Yeah. So how, like if you had to put a percentage on how much your rules engine knows versus what's out there, what would you think that would be? Because there's what, like
Great question.
9,000 something, 9,000
Yeah.
something plans, healthcare plans out there.
Yeah. Great question. So today, back in the envelope, and I apologize. I think the intro, the 1.2 billion, I think that's a little bit out of date. I think it's now close to 1.5, 1.6 in the last like even 3 or 4 months because we've been growing pretty quickly. We would estimate that it's a healthy amount of the market. And the market, when I say the market, I would say like the volume of claims that are going through the United States healthcare system in general, which at this point covers most of the contiguous US states, most plans. There's a long tail, obviously, but most of the time it's covering it. And I think going back to the archetypes, once you have a good enough understanding of the possibilities of the configurations, like what could be a rule, rapidly updating, even if it's a pair that we've never seen before, let's say it's like, I don't know, a self-funded plan, an employer plan that's very specific, right? Like we can very quickly say, hey, based on one claim that we send out, here's the most probable configuration for it. And then based on the data we get back, literally on just a handful of claims, we can quickly update that. And so
Yeah. I was going to
actually
ask
a
what
lot
that
of
process was.
we actually have an incredible team of insurance operations specialists where their entire role is to understand new permutations, new patterns that we haven't seen before and quickly map them and configure them. And so we have it's kind of interesting as well. We'll get to in the next few slides, like the screenshots and the demos and that kind of stuff. But what we'll kind of see today and what the end user actually works with on a day-to-day basis, it's the smallest percentage of what we've actually built, which is kind of ironic. Because when you think about like the power of what we're building and all this type of value, it's in the infrastructure and it's a way that that works all kind of underneath the scenes, right? Like, I don't want a BCBA owner operator to be worrying about rules, configurations, and permutations on the CMS 1500 form. Like, we wouldn't be doing our jobs if you had to even encounter that, frankly. And so it goes to the easier said than done type of conversations where like our job starts to simplify this entire thing so that you just get paid. And what we're kind of talking about right now is like all the what goes into that sausage, I guess, to kind of put it that way, to make that happen.
One last thing, and then we can move to the next slide. I'm curious if there's like, how do you adapt or build for the fact that they might have errors?
Great question. When we flag that there's an error, before it would get submitted, rejected, denied, and then you have to wait, and then it'll come back, you have to work it. We're catching that up front. So it's actually a great transition into this. I don't think we planned that. It just happened. So really what we do then is to say, okay, there's an exception-based workflow. And what I mean by exception-based workflow is remember, claims should just go out all the time. Like the vast majority, like 95, 96, 97% of claims in dollars, it should just happen and get paid. But like you said, there are cases in which maybe something's inputted wrong. Maybe a member ID is malformed. Maybe the authorization isn't in place, right? And we don't want an authorization
Hmm.
denial, so we'll flag it. So we have something called tasks. Tasks is just very simply a to-do list, like a very simple to-do list. And that to-do list is defined by how you can unlock the dollars that would have gone denied and get them sent out, get them paid. And so we'll flag things like, hey, we know this would have been denied because we're missing an authorization. And that's a very simple example. Please
Right.
go and like help us out with that and make that update because you obviously need like a valid authorization. Once that task, that to do is completed, we'll know because we'll just pull the information down again, run it through the validation engine, and this time it just passes and just goes done.
Right.
And
Right.
so this is like the exception-based workflow that we've developed that all of our clinic partners, they are looking at this if they can every morning. They're taking quick because this updates like every single, it's like as close to real time as you can imagine, so that we're not waiting weeks and weeks and weeks to get this
Sure.
information back from insurance. And you just make that update, it goes out and it gets paid.
So, stepping outside of Juniper, when you send a claim off to an insurance provider,
Yeah.
we've been treating it up until this part of the conversation like everything that they do is going to be correct. Are there ever instances to where you send 999 claims and the last one it's identical to all the others? It says no. Like I would
Oh,
imagine
absolutely.
so,
So
right? Like so, what do you do in those
absolutely. So
instances to where
tasks,
there's no rules?
yeah. So there are kind of two different types of tasks here. One is kind of unbilled or before billing tasks that we are
Hmm.
catching with via validation rules in our rules engine. There's also like post submission tasks. Those are like denials. So like a denial that comes back that for some reason our engine didn't catch, which at this point, oftentimes it's only because the payer's kicking something back that's unexpected, right?
Right.
We have a ton of analytics and sophistication to route those pieces of information back to the right party for triage. And that could be us internally, like our insurance operations team. We can say, hey, very first time we've seen this very specific thing, that's interesting. Our internal system might flag that as high priority, or our own internal reporting dashboards. We have a few on the screen in the office over there. Say, like, hey,
Uh-huh.
these are anomalies that we need to check out. And so in
Okay.
those cases, that'll actually inform what our insurance operations teams are investigating, researching, triaging, and building new rules. Or in some cases, let's say it's like a documentation request, we may also flag something like that in tasks to say, hey, let's make sure we coordinate with the clinic owner to make sure all the documents are in place so that we can go get that information submitted for kind of
Yeah.
a re-adjudication.
Is it always like I don't know, I would just assume since the insurance providers are using some software as well that like
Yeah,
I would imagine there's no human being on the other side looking at a claim and saying whether or not it should get paid. But maybe there are. But either way, that
yeah.
that adds more to the point of have you ever gotten a denial back and said there's nothing wrong with this, sent it back and it gets paid? Like what do you do in those situations to where that we say no, you're wrong?
Absolutely. The analytics help, right? Because we can actually then tell, hey, this payer has a pattern of kicking things back when it doesn't really make sense. That's actually great for us to know because
Mhm.
from an effectiveness and triage perspective, we know what to do with it already. There's actually this concept that we talk a lot about internally about like happy paths, right? And
Sure.
so there's kind of this like happy path, or we call like a guided path to say, hey, based on all the information we know about that denial, some of that kickback, and all of our historical data, it can actually just inform how we triage this effectively and efficiently. Which, by the way, that's another draw. You cannot do that with human teams, right? So
Hmm.
we can say, hey, according to thousands and thousands of claims I've gone through a similar type of flow, when something kicks back for this reason, we actually know that no, that's not a credentialing thing, even though they're telling us a credentialing thing. It's actually an
Uh-huh.
eligibility thing, or it's actually an authorizations thing, or there are three different common cases. And so as we're then, because we do work those type of cases, we have like specialists that will then work more complex cases, they can have a guided path to say, hey, when we do call the insurance payer and ask for more information, because we will do that, this is what you should ask, or this is kind of the guided path to getting that resolved quickly. There's, a reason why our performance at major scales, especially when we serve like the regional national folks, is just far better than any human team could do, is because that type of analysis and those types of insights, it's very tough to do that if you only have human teams.
Yeah.
And so,
Yep.
going back to like when you see something like tasks, that is like the smallest tip of the iceberg of what's been built. Very transparently, and this is the first time I think we've said something like this on record. Um, Tasks was one of the last things that we built as a company. And
Okay.
that was like only the last few years. Like in the first few years, we were already doing a lot of this work, but it was all infrastructure, right? And so all that infrastructure is what enables all of that to happen. Tasks is really like, again, it's only the small exception cases that should then start flagging. And so, when it comes to when a payer kicks something back that's unexpected, when they're saying something that, they think is right, but we think is wrong, having the data at our disposal and all this routing makes a huge difference actually getting it resolved effectively. Sometimes that means that we will just resubmit it.
Yeah. Just say try again.
Yeah.
It's really, really interesting.
Are you taking care
Cool.
and
Well,
automating the cleanup of some of these tasks?
yes. Well, the goal is if our automation can take care of it or our teams can take care of it, it never hits tasks.
Right.
Like, it goes back to the simplicity of things. If you're a BCBA owner, I don't want you to even stress about it or worry about it if it's just been taken care of. Which is why we also have really great reporting and insights to say, hey, how is that happening? Where is that happening? And also just kind of show some of this stuff. Like we have a ton of reporting and dashboard. This is just like one of the simplest views. I didn't want to bring kind of the more complicated ones, but everything that's been sent, what's being held, what's in tasks, what's been paid, what's outstanding, what is it over a month, what are collection rates. I'm not showing it here, but there's breakouts of every single dollar in the claim life cycle. Like, where is it? Why is it there? Um, Things are in tasks. What kind of task? Is it because of authorizations issues? Is it because of eligibility issues? Is it because of credentialing issues? All those types of insights and understanding just at a glance, hey, what's the story today? It should be enlightening for a clinic owner to be like, I don't know how I could do that on my own, but when I go to one of these reporting dashboards, I just know instantly, yeah, things are going well. Or no, I need to go look at this, right? We also have very close touch points, our teams, with every clinic owner when we serve them to say like, hey, part of our jobs is to bring that up to you in advance. Like we're going to say, hey, we are noticing this trend, we're noticing this anomaly. Are you aware of it? Yeah, and that's part of the partnerships that we build is to make sure that, hey, we're being your guides across this, and it should be
Sure.
relieving when we can give you all this visibility and guide you through it.
Yeah. Do you also help with like reimbursement rates or at least sharing data like from a visibility standpoint?
Great question. So I've done a lot of initiatives on this kind of stuff, and in fact, we
I
can.
think I saw one you did on like Arkansas or something.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been a huge, huge investment of ours to push this space forward as best as we can by contributing on different initiatives. One of them is like rate reimbursement transparency, and so
It's almost like we
one
planned
thing we've been
this.
doing. It sounds like we planned
Jeez.
this. The
Yeah.
the the visibility. So and just for those that might be watching this, I like to just give a tiny bit of the historical context of like what that is and why it matters. The CMS, Center for Medicaid Medicare Services, they passed a ruling that compelled all commercial insurance payers like Blue Cross Blue Shield, Kaiser, et cetera, to make their reimbursement rates public, available to the public. That didn't exist
Wow.
before that was passed a few years ago. And so there used to be a lot of like antitrust law that like the insurance payer would use to say, no, you can't see that. CMS, this ruling, I think 9915, changed that and said, no, you actually have to make that visible. Ever since that point, these rates are actually available, but your mom and pop, like a BCBA owned practice, even me with my technical background, just with my laptop, I wouldn't be able to do it because the amount of data that they just like throw on their website is terabytes large. Like you literally just can't even actually if you go to United Healthcare's website and look for payer rate transparency, there's a notice at the top of the screen that says something like you may not be able to download this file onto your computer because of its size. Like they're even acknowledging like good luck, you can't do this as an individual. And so what
But
we
they're
did
checking the
is to
box.
say exactly, they're checking the box from a regulation
Yeah.
perspective. We went in there and said, okay, hey, we're a tech firm. We can build technology and infrastructure to do this. And so one thing we did is to aggregate and visualize this data specifically for the pediatric therapy kind of treatment space, and say, okay, if you're looking at something like Kaiser, what are the reimbursement rates? And so we've done. It kind of started with our collaboration with the Council of Autism Service Providers around this time last year, and a huge thanks
Mhm.
to them and Lori and leadership them there to kind of facilitate that process to do kind of our first displays of, hey, like we want to give this data out. We want to show kind of what that looks like so that individuals have the empowerment to understand what their rates are. We do that at no charge. This is not part of our business model. It's really, we have a ton of focus on giving back to the industry where we can. Our view is as a technology provider, if we have the ability to just keep pushing this forward through that type of work, through network adequacy type of work that we're also doing with CASP, we've been collaborating with different policy groups, state policy groups on this kind of stuff as well. Let's do that.
Mhm.
And that's been a huge initiative of ours. And we have some great individuals working on our team. Joel is doing a lot of this coordination with different individuals at different, like, especially the state-based policy groups and the trade organizations that really push us forward. There's a lot of developments there that I don't think I can share yet that we're really excited about. So more to come in the coming months that he's leading. And we're really excited about it because, going back to the reason why we're here and democratizing that access to data, the visibility, the technology, and pushing the field forward is just something that we're really passionate about.
Right. So how are I mean, if you can't say, that's fine, but how are you planning on using this, the transparency of the data with your clients as a service?
Great question. Well, it's not a service that we provide from like a business service context. So we don't sell the data. We don't do any kind of like monetization of that data, and that's also why we're giving it away for free. But the way that they and whether they're clients of ours or otherwise, the way they use that data can be for a multitude of cases. So some use it to understand where their rates compare to others in the market to say, hey, I should go
Right.
back
Can they
to
leverage it at
my
all?
so, those are things that conversations that they've had. So, if you are serving with Blue Cross Blue Shield, you may say, "Hey, I'm noticing my rate is X. I'm
Mhm.
noticing others is X plus 50 cents a unit." And having conversations with their provider reps and asking like, "Hey, what's the story there? I want to, get higher rates," things like that. Explicitly, we don't assist with negotiation of rates. There's a lot
Okay.
of compliance and legal reasons why we don't. So we see ourselves as kind of like data conduits and having the access to that.
Mhm.
And so for
Mhm.
us, we provide kind of the tools they need to have the right conversations that they want to have. We don't serve our clients for like contracting, for example. And the other way they use it is to understand for those that are growing, where should I grow? Who should I become a network with? For
Right.
those that are
Yeah.
multi-state clients, or they're saying, hey, I'm in California right now, I'm looking at Arizona, what would that look like? Right. And I'm also just a huge believer in, especially given my background, the business and financial knowledge being an incredibly important side of even if you're a mom and pop owner operator, BCBA, understanding that so that you create the right organization that's sustainable from a financial perspective, incredibly important. And so understanding these rates
Mhm.
really help, right? Because you can say, hey, if I were to grow for one more location, serve this payer in network, what would that look like for my bottom line? And
Right.
something I tell a lot of folks is like, hey, talking about the bottom line, talking about the finance piece of things, that's a good thing because it's what powers and enables hiring more clinicians, delivering more care, and putting those things together is really important. So that's the way
Yeah.
that they're using a lot of these rates. A few other different cases of just understanding the industry in general, where it's trending, where rates are increasing, where rates are compressing. Those are some different ways that people are using this data.
Yeah. That's super interesting, and it's such a valuable piece of information for a startup to know, to model, to lean against, to know going into a negotiation what they should be getting versus what they're getting offered and things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it seems like you're hitting almost almost all the pieces here. Is there maybe I was thinking of something else, but do you also, this is kind of off the topic, but do you also you do some sort of guarantee with the billing as well, do you not?
We don't
With the
guarantee
claims?
explicitly. Yeah, we don't guarantee explicitly like a collection rate or things like that because frankly, it depends on some of the topics we were talking about earlier, like the quality of the data being put in the system, the way that we
Hmm.
work with clinic owners in partnership and things like that. But from a results and a metrics perspective and all that kind of stuff, what I like to say is like it's incredibly visible. And
Sure.
that should be visible in the ways where you have incredible confidence that like this is working. But you can also have the
Hmm.
reassurance that like it's so visible that if it's not working, yeah, it'll be abundantly clear, right? So
Sure,
it's a
sure,
great
sure.
way of keeping up accountability and things like that. One thing that we didn't talk about that we don't do is we don't do the clinical side of things. We don't do data collection. We
Right.
don't do like anything related to kind of what the therapists and the BTs and that sort of thing that they're using in clinic or in home. Because I think what we're really passionate about is enabling those types of tools and others to do that well. And we can just make sure that, hey, at the end of the day, you're getting paid for that. And something we're really
Yeah.
passionate about. Like, I'm not a clinician, right? And like in the future, like maybe that's, higher clinical talent, all that kind of stuff. But like, we want to focus on really helping organizations focus on their care. And that's something that from what we're building and why we're building it, it's really important to us.
Yeah. No, it's great. We kind of have the same outlook at Motivity, but from the opposite perspective, from the clinical side, right? We
Yeah.
want to spend all of our time building that, and that's what we love doing. Um, so what's next for Juniper? Where are you guys going? What's happening? What's on the
Yeah.
roadmap?
Yeah, I think the thing I'm most excited about is the things related to policy work and pushing the industry forward. There's a lot of stuff happening there that we're hoping to share in the coming months, early next year. So that's one big initiative in general that's going. We got started kind of thanks to the folks over at CASP and other like state, trade organizations, Jade Health, as well as like the state
Right.
policy groups. So that's been great and really rewarding, fulfilling to say, like, yes, we can now. We're at kind of a maturity of a company and a size of company where we can actually put real dollars behind that development too, that
Sure.
we are just very passionate about it. It's not for like, it's great to obviously have like the publicity of things and that's always great, but it's not it's stuff that we can invest in purely just to push the space forward. So that's really where a lot of my passion is, especially considering my personal ties to the space. In
Mm,
terms of like the core business and where this is going, I think one huge thing is just the continuing to scale and serve more and more. I think, especially over the last 2 years, it's really scaled quickly. Kind of talking about the amount of claims that we see today powering our rules engine, but a lot of it too is just getting in front of more folks that can benefit from this. We've been relatively under wraps until about this year. We didn't
hmm.
start doing. We went to our first like set of conferences to like talk with folks like last year, and that was just
Hmm.
very much like me traveling from place to place and just having conversations. uh, you know, the whole kind of marketing pushes and outreach and that kind of stuff is really only getting started because we want to make sure that we felt very confident that what we've built was going to be responsible and do it well and do it right. Um,
Hmm.
it's very clear to us that we've been there and it's only continuing to expand. Just really, I mean, a lot of it's like referrals and word of mouth from folks that have heard
Right.
about us and like really want to
Yeah.
get involved. And I think one next big part is just really kind of going full force and getting this out there to people that need it. I talk with folks on my team all the time that do outreach and look for partnership and things like that. And we've had a few cases now in which uh, by the time we've reached out to someone and connected with them, it was a little bit too late. And those are the cases that actually really kind of are most candidly frustrating, I think. And I'll use
Hmm.
that word because uh, I really do believe that if everyone had the knowledge about how this world looks now, because this is kind of new stuff, like this type of technology and automation didn't exist in this space before. And I do think that if people understood this more and knew about it more, we could prevent cases in which, things weren't sustainable enough and things didn't work out and clinics have closed while others open. And uh,
Hmm.
so I'm just really passionate about like if everyone can know that this exists and it's a resource for them and it can work like that. That's I think where I'm most focused on in the next year.
Sure. Yeah. That's awesome. Let's answer some questions. We got two in here.
Awesome.
What identifiers or markers should clinic owners keep a close eye on with billing and RCM before evaluating technology and automation?
It's a great question. I think one way that I frame with clinic owners, especially ones that are a little bit smaller, is what is most risky for your clinic to operate sustainably? Like I'm going back to the stories of the owner operators that just do claims on their own, or maybe they've worked with one person that does all of this, and maybe they submit claims like once every few weeks, once a month. It's when you realize, hopefully before it breaks, that hey, what were to happen if this stopped? Right? What were
Hmm.
to happen if actually just last January we started working with a clinic in Michigan that what happened was their biller, one person, actually had to take medical leave for an emergency, and their cash flow stopped. Right, and it's this idea of like, well, before something like that happens, can you identify where the most risk is to like sustainable operations will be? And if you're in a position where that's you, that's a great indicator to say like, hey, technology that can work and automate this well can really do a lot to put in that foundation before you are growing more, right? And you can focus on the right stuff.
Hmm.
So I would say that that's one of the biggest things for folks that are on the smaller scale. For folks on the larger scale, it's really the visibility to analytics, understanding performance. So, we do actually a lot of diagnostic work, and our diagnostic work, we call it revenue cycle diagnostics, works with different providers that don't really have an understanding of like what's going on. Maybe they're working with an outsourced billing company, maybe they're doing it themselves, but they don't really know what's going on. But maybe they suspect that something's challenging, where they're noticing cash flow isn't what it used to be. Payroll is still always a little bit higher than what's comfortable. And so we
Hmm.
will actually go in and we've built a lot of technology. I've built some of it myself to just, we obviously do BAAs for HIPAA compliance, we do mutual NDAs for privacy, and we just go in and pull data and do analysis of it. We can usually do it in a day or two, and we just show everyone. And today it's like a 30-page presentation with all the graphics and everything, kind of inspired by my consulting days. It's a type of presentation that we used to give to the multi-billion-dollar
Right.
hospital systems, but now like you can do this with like an owner operator clinic and show them, hey, here's every little piece of what's happening, here's why it's happening, here's what you should look at. And so to
Hmm.
answer that question of like what are the indicators, the data and the visibility is really the key one for folks as well.
Yeah, being able to follow the money. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, last question. How is Juniper's validation checks different from what a clearinghouse or an EHR could catch?
Great question. A lot of times for clearinghouses, they're really built for hospital systems. That's also something we notice, right? So if you look at the Change Healthcare, the Waystar, the Office Ally, the Trizetto, these are really built for medical claims for hospital systems. They're really not built for ABA. And so for those that have done this themselves, you would know that ABA billing and kind of the rules and that kind of stuff are way more specific, way more esoteric, have a lot more variance for the different payers, especially because commercial reimbursement is, in the grand scheme of things, relatively new.
It's new. Yeah.
And yeah, when you actually have specific data for this treatment space, ABA, and also do a lot of SLPOT, physical rehab, you can build rule sets that are just orders of magnitude more sophisticated than clearinghouses.
Hmm.
Also, one thing to just point out is because we've built the infrastructure around multiple clearinghouses, we're not dependent on any single clearinghouse. So if one goes down, for those that are familiar, the Change Healthcare outage that happened this year, I mean, that was like a healthcare industry, like historical event. Like even something
Hmm.
that crazy, I tell family friends that like don't understand what I'm like, imagine if like Visa went down or MasterCard went
Right.
down. That was
Right.
really what that was, right?
Yeah.
But we now have the ability to say, hey, we can actually just route claims to different clearinghouses and say, okay, we're going to choose this clearinghouse or that clearinghouse. That kind of ability to de-risk that is huge. And so, really, what you're choosing with the infrastructure that we've built is incredible sophistication specific to this space to make this work
Hmm.
at massive scale and de-risking a lot of those like individual breaking points. And so,
Yeah.
when I go back to like the platform and the tasks and the reporting is really just like a small percentage of everything that's been built. That's also what I mean by that. It's really cool, kind of the all of the things that make that possible, whether that's the validation rules or all the other infrastructure we built.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's yeah, this has been we just hit 50 minutes and it feels like we just started talking. So this has been really great. It was so interesting to learn everything about you guys. And Christy, do you have any questions, comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. As a clinician myself, I mean, I had to bill, or I'm not billing at the moment. I'm working for Motivity, but it's just such a headache, and you don't want to do it because, like, that is not what you go to school for. You want to help people.
Yep.
So I really
Yep.
appreciate how you're just kind of looking out for us. And I've been around. Well, I was certified in 2012, which is a little bit earlier. Back then, we were all doing our own billing. I mean, there were some of the larger groups, of course, but for the most part, now it's like, no, you just need somebody to bill for you. You can't do it on your own. You can't.
Yeah.
It's too hard. So thank you for, helping.
Yeah.
Help us out.
I mean,
as we do.
it's something we're really passionate about. Also, like, so
Mhm.
I have some family friends that are like clinical directors and that kind of stuff that went through that, and huge passion. Also, my own mom is like a small business owner, and
Oh, yeah.
when you think about like, especially like the owner operators that are really just trying to start for the first time and start scaling, and now they have like a small team and that kind of stuff. Um, it's hard enough, and
Yeah.
like all the other stuff. I mean, that's why at the very beginning I was like, a lot of this inspiration was just this conviction that you shouldn't have to do that. Like, it
Right.
really that shouldn't be how the world works. It is the way the world works today, and we all know why. And U.S. insurance and the way that that's all set up, that's a whole other conversation. But
Kind of like taxes or
there's a
real estate. None of this stuff we should have to
Exactly.
do. Other people should have to do it.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
and we can change that. So
Yeah.
that's why we're here.
Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you, Nathan. I hope everyone enjoyed this presentation. Don't forget to mark your calendars for October 10th at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, when we'll host a CEU webinar with Danielle Beal called Servant Leadership, a Call to Action. I'm really excited about that. You can register now through Behavior Live. But thank you, everyone, for spending some time with us today.
Thanks
It's great
a lot.
to